The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right. This is an amazing revelation here regarding God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. This prediction being that there will be an explosion, a bomb, in New York City on January 13th, 2025. It's predicted to be a suitcase nuke or perhaps some other form of bomb, including a dirty bomb. There will be a large-scale evacuation from Manhattan Island. This is what is being communicated in God's signs. Now, I have an update here to a lot of things, some of which I haven't explained or mentioned in any other prior video. And what I have done here is really summarized some things for some people that know what I'm talking about in an email. And in order to bring the information out into this video, I'm just going to go through what I wrote and add on explanations to what is going on here, okay? So the date that this video is posted proves the prediction is being made ahead of time, and so does the timestamp in the email, but also the forensic notes PDF document. And what is going on here is that a very big, important prophetic sign that God has really pointed to is Pope Francis is opening of portal doors in Rome. He has opened 5 portal doors, and they have called them as such, portals. And it's a ritual that they conduct, every 25 years in Rome. But this year, they've, for the first time, opened 5 doors. And that's because God is pointing to the 5th trumpet. God uses firsts for signs, first of all. So this is the first time in doing this ritual that, first of all, it's the first time that the Antichrist has done this ritual, because the ritual is only done once every 25 years, and Pope Francis hasn't been Pope for 25 years. But this is the first year ever they have opened 5 doors instead of 4 doors. All right, and that is because of the 5th trumpet, which talks about in the book of Revelation, which describes the opening of the portal door to the fallen angels, demons, through which they will cross into the earthly realm. The collision between the demonic and earthly realm is what is described. The portal door will be opened with a key, and the Vatican is symbolized by keys. And this isn't an accident. This is designed by God, because all along the popes have been lowercase a antichrists. It has been, since the beginning, a pope would be the antichrist. And furthermore, that is more than clear in Old Testament prophecy. But that's not the subject of this video. The subject of this video is the Pope opening with the key these portal doors. And also, I don't have a picture for you, but you can find it if you would like on the internet. If you connect the dots between these various doors around Rome, they engender a satanic, what would you call it, sort of pentagram thing. I don't know the term for this specific design or whatever you want to. I don't even know the terminology, so I apologize. But it's something to do with Satanism, okay? And so the first door, though, was opened on Christmas Eve, which also coincided with the eve of Hanukkah, and which began at sunset, because days in the Hebrew calendar begin at sunset. And so, in other words, it coincided with the beginning of Hanukkah. Hanukkah is symbolism for the end times and the Antichrist. The festival of Hanukkah dates back to the 2nd century BC and Antiochus Epiphanes, who is a foreshadow or a type for the Antichrist, who came upon the Temple Mount and set up an abomination, which is what is described in Bible prophecy for the end. And so there are parallels, and the foreshadow of the end times is Hanukkah. And okay, so let's okay. So then the next following day was Christmas Day, and we had this prophetic sign involving the football game in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was a Christmas Day football game, the first time that the NFL held a Christmas Day football game. And again, God uses firsts for signs. And it was also, I think, the first broadcast on Netflix for a football game. Also, the halftime show was an extremely prophetic sign that revealed that Jimmy Carter would die 4 days later. Unfortunately, I didn't pick up on it in time. I've been following the trail of signs leading to the death of Jimmy Carter for many months, but I dropped the ball and I was distracted with the other things God was pointing to, including the prediction for the bomb and in New York, and also the coming death of Trump and also the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash. And so anyway, but that's unfortunate, but whatever. And anyway, how that revealed the death of Jimmy Carter is that Beyonce, who performed the halftime show, her show was the theme of her new album named Cowboy Carter. And it is widely known that she is obsessed with the number 4. For example, one of her albums is named 4. Instead of wedding rings, her and her husband have tattooed on their ring finger the Roman numeral for 4, which is why their daughter's name is Ivy, which is IV, the Roman numeral for 4. Okay, and anyway, that's why her Cowboy Carter performance was 4 days before the death of Jimmy Carter. Anyway, that's just another thing. But back to the subject of this video, the fact that the football game was in Pittsburgh hints at the bottomless pit that's described in the 5th trumpet, from which the demons will cross over into the earthly realm after the pit is opened with a key. So that's why the game was in Pittsburgh. There's lots more to the prophetic significance of the game and Pittsburgh. It's formerly, I believe, Heinz Stadium, and when it was Heinz Stadium, they had a giant ketchup bottle, and that's because of the king of ketchup. Heinz is the king of ketchup, and we were talking about the Antichrist king. And it also relates to Jimmy Carter, who incidentally is king symbolism because God has demonstrated a parallel with the prophecy of the 5th through 8th kings with Jimmy Carter and the presidents. But that's all explained in the Jimmy Carter videos. Okay, back to the subject. That's the thing about God's prophetic signs. They're extremely difficult to explain because it's an interconnected web. And when you try to explain one part of the web, you end up pulling the entire web. So because it's all interconnected, and one thing requires a second witness or a third witness to explain it, and those things in turn require second and third witnesses to explain them, and those things in turn require second and third witnesses to explain them, and it goes off into infinity. And that's the nature of God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. It's infinite. It's not linear. It's three-dimensional. And anyway, this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It works on the principle of these second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter. As the Bible says is required, and this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. Now, what I was speaking of, though, was the Heinz king of ketchup, which again hints at the Antichrist king, but it's if you know the logo of the Heinz ketchup bottle, it's Formula 57. It's a big 57 on the Heinz ketchup bottles. And I believe the story is Mr. Heinz back in the day just picked the number. But that number hints at the fifth trumpet because it's the fifth of the 7 trumpets, and that's what 57 hints at, the fifth of the 7 trumpets. That's why it's Pittsburgh. But also the mass demonic possession of the demons that will cross through the portal, the mass demonic possession of those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist will be triggered by 5G frequencies, and the letter G is the 7th letter in the alphabet. That's another reason for 57 here. Now, the name of the stadium currently, which by the way is a second witness to the prophetic significance of the former name, Heinz Stadium, all right? But the current name is, like I wrote in the email here, Acrisure. It's, I believe, a name for an insurance company, but the name Acrisure hints at AC, which is an abbreviation for Antichrist, and Risher is a French word that means waves. It's an archaic French word that means waves. Thank you to Steve Fletcher of Steve Fletcher 222 channel for this insight. And that's why following all of this, or beginning on this day, this same day, this Christmas day, were the extreme waves on the coast, on the west coast of South America, where Pope Francis is from, South America. Okay, and so so now you've probably heard in the news of the waves that hit Ecuador, Peru, and Chile, right? That's a prophetic sign, and it's part of this parallel with Luke 21:25. And let me just read Luke 21:25. And there will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and on the earth distress of nations, in perplexity because of the roaring of the sea and the waves. People fainting with fear and with foreboding of what is coming on the world. For the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now then, these things begin to take place. When these things begin to take place, straighten up and raise your heads because your redemption is drawing near. That is really profound given what we are talking about here with these connections. Let's start from the beginning here. We have a sign in the sun and moon and the stars coinciding with these waves. Okay, the waves again began on the 25th, but they ended on January 1st, which coincidentally coincided with Hanukkah. In other words, these waves perfectly coincided with the period of the festival of Hanukkah. And again, the festival of Hanukkah is symbolism for the end times and the period of the Antichrist. Okay? Now, the sign is this new moon. The new moon, the dark moon, a new moon, coincided with Christmas Eve and Christmas morning day, right? It's coincided precisely with the new year. That's an interesting thing. It's like an omen, kind of, if you will. But what it does is serve to confirm what I am saying. And this, these signs pointing to this passage here. Okay, so also the new moon and the sun are in the constellation Sagittarius, at least at this time, or at that time. And that constellation Sagittarius, you can see when you connect the dots of the stars, the main stars, a boat. And these waves on the coast of South America were known for the damage they did to the boats. You've probably seen the images of the waves smashing into the boats that are anchored off the shore there. So this was a boat sign, right? And that's why in the next line we have, and distress of nations, plural. So it was 3 nations. The sign we are talking about here involved multiple nations. In fact, you could also include the US, because it is said that these waves were the result of a wind storm, a wind pattern emanating off the coast of the US, which makes sense because this sign begins in the US and God's signs revolve around the US. Why is that? People ask me, why are you always focused on the US? The answer to that is because God is. The prophetic signs revolve around the US because God is focused on the US. As Abraham Lincoln said, America is an almost chosen nation. It is an Israel. It is a God's chosen nation. Only 2 nations in the world's history were founded on a relationship with God and the Bible, Israel and America, right? I actually recently got into a little bit of a debate, not a full debate, but a little bit of back and forth with someone from South Africa just a few days ago, who is, I just met him on the street and started trying to tell him about Jesus through the roundabout way that I do it. And anyway, through prophetic signs, because that's what they're for. But so anyway, it was clear to me, I'm just assuming, I'm making an assumption, but he was a leftist, someone who doesn't know God. In other words, the 2 are synonymous, a leftist and someone who doesn't know God, and not a believer in God, etc. And and like typically leftists have problems with America. That's spiritual at its root. And so he had a problem with me speaking of these signs related to America, long story short. And he said to me, typical of a European, or I guess in this case someone from South Africa, the typical criticisms of Americans, how supposedly they don't travel, although it's not true. That was his criticism. I could list the 3. They don't travel, they're fat, and whatever. They don't. I think those are only the 2, maybe. but it's ridiculous, right? But anyway, so this guy came up with the classic. Your problem here. He interrupted me. Your problem here is that you're focused on America. And I said, well, okay, so what other, so I explained to him, I was talking about the Pilgrims and the spiritual founding of America, and why it was Flight 11 with a crew of 11 that flew into the Twin Towers. It looked like a giant 11 in New York State, the 11th state, because it was the Pilgrims that departed the 11-ship flotilla and 101 passengers on the Mayflower, et cetera, right? So he's like, well, so what other nation, was there in history that was founded on a relationship with God? And he tried to tell me that South Africa was one such nation, telling me that the Afrikaners were like the Pilgrims and they founded the nation in God. I'm highly dubious of that. I haven't had time to check that history. I really doubt it. I'm sure it was founded on some sort of economic thing, and not for the reason that the Pilgrims left, which was for the relief of persecution from the King of England, which is why they saw their crossing of the Atlantic as analogous to the Israelites escaping the persecution of the king of Egypt and then crossing the Jordan River to their promised land. The New World was the Pilgrims' promised land. And so the thing that I'm getting at here is that through this roundabout explanation, the reason why he's wrong, it took me, for the sake of being polite and furthering the conversation and not getting really into a debate, I somewhat agreed with him, and it didn't really have the answer to his thing about the Afrikaners. But the answer is that the Afrikaners weren't escaping persecution. So that's what's different about the Pilgrims. Even if the Afrikaners did come to South Africa, I doubt it, but even if they did come to South Africa and claim to be the new land for God, they weren't escaping persecution. And the proof of that is that the Pilgrims came from Holland. The Dutch, they were in Holland to escape the persecution in England. They successfully escaped the persecution in Holland, but they feared for the culture corrupting their children of the Dutch society. And so they needed to get away from that too, which the Afrikaners wouldn't have been leaving the the Netherlands for that reason. Okay, so sorry about that. But getting back to the fact that these waves emanated from the US, but also we have the connection here from the Acrisure Stadium sign, which of course is in the US. Now, that's why anyway these waves hit these nations, plural, Ecuador, Chile, and Peru. And well, of course, they caused perplexity. The people on the shores, if you know the video footage, they're perplexed. The whole region is like, what is going on? These waves are unprecedented. It's perplexity. And the sea, of course, it's because of the roaring of the sea and the waves. Now, I'm not saying this is the final fulfillment of this prophecy by any means, because there, in fact, has already been another partial fulfillment of this prophecy. In other words, what I am saying is that it is only symbolism. This isn't the fulfillment of this prophecy necessarily, it's symbolism. And so anyway, that's what this sign is. And so the people are, but here's the missing part, the key, no pun intended, part to this prophecy here. The people fainting with fear and with foreboding of what is coming on the world. For the powers of the heavens will be shaken. To be fair, it was Steve Fletcher that pointed out the parallel with this passage, but what he's left out is the most important part, which is the reason for, Peru and Chile, for example. But it's the reason for the Pope and its connection to the doors and this period of the waves coinciding with the opening of the portal doors. It's because the Pope is symbolically opening the portal to the demonic realm, which will release the fallen angels who will then come into the world and, for one thing, pretend to be aliens. And that's what's being referred to here, with the fainting in fear and with foreboding of what is coming on the world. For the powers of the heavens will be shaken. This is referring to the collision between the demonic and earthly realm, when the barrier between these two realms is removed, symbolized by the opening of a portal door. Okay, and the reason why Chile and Peru symbolize this is something that was learned quite a while ago in God's signs, is that they symbolize this because of the Nazca lines. The Nazca lines in the Andes in Peru and Chile. That's why when the Pope, the Antichrist, visited these two countries recently in 2018, he famously or infamously wore an outfit with a big image of the most famous pictogram of the Nazca lines, the giant. I think it's named the giant. But that's a reference to the book of Genesis and the fallen angels who are referred to as giants. Giants, in other words, is symbolism. That's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence, for example, that the baseball team in San Francisco, as in Pope Francis, is named the Giants. It's because the keys, which the Vatican is symbolized by, will open the bottomless pit as described in Revelation chapter 9 in the fifth trumpet, which is why, again, 5 portal doors. Okay, and that's why Pope Francis is from this big peninsula of southern South America, if you will, which Chile and Peru are part of. And, okay, so I think I've explained it, actually. That's the reason for the prophetic symbolic significance of Peru and Chile and these signs that coincide with the opening of the portal doors by the Pope. Okay, so back to some other things here. Again, to summarize, again, we have, well, do I need to summarize? Well, let's just do it, I guess. The beginning of the portal doors were opened with the beginning of the waves, and they coincided with the waves, the festival of Hanukkah. We had also the football game in Pittsburgh, which hints at the bottomless pit, in Heinz Field in Acrisure, which hints at Antichrist and waves. Okay, now, the waves that hit Ecuador, Peru, and Chile began on the day of the game, were said to emanate from the coast of the U.S., and lasted until January 1st, the end of Hanukkah. Hanukkah is symbolism for the end of times. Okay. Now, the details that are amazing and reveal further confirmation and also more information here. The waves killed 3 people, right? The story is, and it's known for this, how it killed 3 people. It was 3 nations, the coasts of 3 nations, Ecuador, Peru, and Chile. It was known for having closed 91 ports in Peru. And 91 is the 13th triangular number. God has used 91 for this purpose prior to this in his big picture of science. In a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 13th row is 91. Okay? Also, the waves were 13 feet. So 3 deaths, the coasts of 3 nations, 13th triangular number of ports. Oh, by the way, ports is a hint at the portals. The story is how the ports were closed because of the waves. And this is further confirmation of this coinciding or being related to the Pope's opening of the portal doors during this period. It's amazing. Now, 13 feet, so 3 deaths, coasts of 3 nations, 13th triangular number of ports, and 13-foot-high waves are for the purpose of pointing to Pope Francis, who was elected on the date 3/13 in 2013. In other words, these numbers symbolize Pope Francis because Pope Francis is symbolized by the day he was elected. But the reason for that, and the reason why he was elected on the date 3/13, is because Rome converted to Catholicism on the date 3/13. And the conversion of Rome to Catholicism was the worst thing that happened to Christianity in history. It was all meant to be. It's all part of God's plan, if you will. But it objectively was the worst thing that happened to Christianity because, for one, it began this period of time in which every single person was a Christian, but it wasn't true. But in order to make that happen, the Catholic Church did all sorts of things to make it so that everyone would want to be part of the church and make it comfortable for everyone to be in the church. In other words, all these workarounds, changes to the Bible, the corruption of the first century concept of the intermediate place, their purgatory, you name it. Everything the Catholics have invented have been ultimately for the purpose of bringing everyone in. And what's that root of that? Of course, partly is money, corruption, because that brings in money. It's still to this day a extremely profitable business, the Catholic religion, right? And which Jesus forbid, by the way, preaching for money. And priests aren't the only ones guilty of this, by the way. The so-called quote-unquote pastors are also guilty of this, but don't get me started. But also the reason why the conversion of Rome is the worst thing is that when it converted, it didn't discard its pagan religion. It just repackaged it. Like the worship of Mary, for example, is just a reincarnation, a repackaging of the worship of the fertility goddess. That was prevalent in all societies prior to Catholicism. The worship of Aphrodite or Isis or Ishtar. Even the layout in Rome is symbolic of this worship of the fertility, with the big obelisk in the round center in the basilica, outside the basilica, St. Peter's Basilica. You've got the round colonnade columns surrounding the giant obelisk in the center. That's the quintessential, classic, if you will, depiction of fertility in fertility worship religion. The obelisk and the round shape are symbolic of the man and woman's genitalia. So anyway, yeah. And God hates pagan religion. The thing that God hates the most, the God of the Bible, is false religion. And God was constantly chastising the Jews for mixing their true religion with the false religion of their pagan neighbors, which is what Catholicism is. It's a mixture of Christianity and the Bible and pagan religion, and God hates that. In fact, it's the thing that he hates the most. I'm not saying God hates Catholics, but what I'm saying is that if a Catholic will be saved, it will be in spite of this, not because of it. But anyway, back to the subject here. So we have all of the reason, again, for the 3 deaths, coasts of 3 nations, 13th triangular number of ports, as in portals, and 13-foot-high waves is because it points to Pope Francis, but the election date of Pope Francis in itself, Pope identifies the conversion of Rome as being the, what it does is it confirms that Rome is Mystery Babylon, because Babylon is symbolic of pagan religion. That's the symbolism of Babylon. That's why Peter called Rome Babylon, speaking of Peter and the Catholic Church supposedly being built on Peter. Peter was never in Rome. There's no record of Peter being in Rome, and he called Rome Babylon in his writings. Paul wrote a number of letters addressing people in Rome and never mentioned Peter. But anyway, of course, the bishops and the popes needed to invent this connection between Rome and Peter in order to justify their authority. But the one verse that the entire Catholic religion hinges upon, Matthew 16:18, is when Jesus said to Peter, or rather Simon, "Simon, you are Peter. Upon this rock of truth I will build my church." So, okay, what Jesus said was, "Simon, you are Petros," which is the masculine version of the name for rock, which refers to or means a rock or a stone or a pebble. And on this rock, Petra, the feminine word for the word rock, I will build my church. Okay? And then later, a couple of verses later, Jesus referred to Peter as Satan. In the same passage, in the same chapter. So if Jesus is going to build his church on Peter, why in the world did he refer to him as Satan right after that? Of course, he isn't building his church on a man. That's blasphemy. Right? But also, if you know the Bible, man is inherently corrupt and evil. It's not for building a church on a man. What Jesus was saying was a response to what Peter had just said. Because prior to this statement, Jesus asked his disciples, who do they think he is? And Peter was the first to say out loud that he is the Christ, the Messiah. And then Jesus said, "Simon, you are Petros, and on this Petra I will build my church." Okay, they're 2 different words, and when you build a structure on something, you build it on bedrock, not a man. Jesus was saying he's going to build his church on the truth that Peter had just stated, which is that he is the Christ. But the Catholics need this one verse to claim the authority to make up all of their man-made religion on top of the Bible. Because a Catholic that does not know that the Catholic religion isn't in the Bible is so immensely ignorant of their own religion, it is not even worth words. But most Catholics do know this. They do, like I'm saying, claim that the Pope has the authority to make up all of this new stuff on top of the Bible, because the church is supposedly built on Peter. That's why I'm saying the entire Catholic religion hinges on this one verse. And when you disprove this, you disprove the entire Catholic religion, which isn't a legitimate denomination of Christianity. It's not a denomination of Christianity, all right? It's a pagan religion, okay, you get my point. And I only say all of this, by the way, to help Catholics, incidentally, but also confused people that aren't Catholics that don't know that the Pope is the Antichrist and are about to be fooled. Anyway, so now there's more to this though. In metric, the waves are 4 meters high. In the stories, the media stories, the waves are 4 meters high. And the waves ended on January 1st, the day that Francis opened the 4th door. Okay? It's the end of Hanukkah, and Pope Francis is opening 5 doors, but the 4th one was opened at the end of the waves that were 4 meters high. The reason for that is the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet was, in ancient Hebrew, a pictogram for a door. In other words, the number 4 is symbolic of a door, a portal. And again, these waves shut down the ports of Peru during the period that the Antichrist was opening the portal doors. Okay? Now, here's something just so amazing that came to me this morning, and that's why I had to make this video here. January 1st, 2025, was exactly 7 years after Pope Francis issued a postcard, a Vatican postcard he printed with an image of a boy amidst the destruction after the bomb on Hiroshima. That's actually Nagasaki, the image that he used. Now, 7 years, I'm going to jump ahead because this isn't the order I would like to be in to explain it. So 7 years is 84 months. First of all, 7 years is the period of time that symbolizes the end times in the most central prophecy in the Bible, and also symbolizes the period of the Antichrist. Okay? So that's the prophetic significance of this exact 7 years. Now, 7 years is also 84 months. 84 in Hebrew gematria is equal to the word bomb. It's also equal to Obama, which God is playing on to hint at Obama, who will become the president again as a result of the coming predicted bomb in New York City. And speaking of the 4 feet high waves and the 4th door, Obama is was the 44th president. And speaking of firsts, Obama was the first sitting president to visit Hiroshima. And speaking of speeches in the 2 cities that the only nuclear bombs were dropped on, Pope Francis visited Nagasaki and delivered his speech in Nagasaki. So you got the 2 antichrists, because in Bible prophecy there are 2 antichrists. The 44th president is the second of the 2 that gets his power from the first. The 2 antichrists spoke and Pope Francis was the first pope to speak in one of the Japanese cities on which the bomb was dropped. So you have these firsts, and these 2 antichrists had their first speeches at these 2 cities that the bomb was dropped on. Now, the huge thing here is that why this connects to the portal doors is that the demons that will pass through the portal and pretend to be aliens will claim to be here in order to help us with our nuclear weapons. That's right. That's why the two antichrists were in these two cities delivering their first speeches. And that's why this all connects to these portal doors. The port symbolism and the ports in Peru where the Nazca lines are, etc. And the Pope wearing that outfit with the Nazca lines on it. Okay? The giant. Because the giants are going to come through, and guess what? They're going to say that the Pope is the ambassador for the world for them. And why will that be? Well, because the Pope has presented this image of himself as being highly concerned with nuclear weapons. That's right. That's right. Okay? So, and overnight that will give the Pope authority over the governments of the world, which will make him the Antichrist. Now, the Pope on January 1st, 2018, or I should be more precise, the Catholic, let me go to that article. Okay, Pope prints postcard illustrating the horror of war. This is, I don't know the name of this, National Catholic Reporter, okay? Anyway, so this is the image. This is the postcard. And Pope Francis wrote, "The fruit of war." Okay? Typical leftist statement. Not that war isn't evil, but the left doesn't understand. They have an immature, infantile view of things and the world, and a worldview that is infantile because it's based on feelings and is lacking completely, 100%, in wisdom, because the beginning of wisdom, as the Bible says, begins with the fear of God, which they have no fear of. And that's why they have no wisdom at all. Anyway, the Vatican newspaper, L'Osservatore Romano, printed a copy of the photograph and the Pope's explanation on the back of its edition on January 1st, the Catholic Church's World Peace Day. Okay, so January 1st is the symbolic date. That's why it's exactly 7 years to January 1st, 2025, and the end of the 4 feet high waves and the opening of the 4th portal door, which ties the waves to the portal doors, but also in the process points to the 44th president. But again, also the number 4 symbolizes door, as I explained. Now, the thing is, as you can see in the image, it's about a boy. Okay, just remember that. It's about this boy, and the Pope gives an explanation. The Pope says that the boy's sadness is contained in him biting his lip, and apparently the Pope says that there's blood dripping from his lip. I don't see the blood in the image, but whatever. It is a very, very extremely disturbing photo, I have to agree. It's a very sad photo. Okay. All right, now the Pope will become the leader of the world and the UN after demons pretending to be aliens and claim to be here to be helping us with our nuclear weapons and our climate change problem. So supposed climate change problem, because that's a lie. It's a lie from Satan, literally. Okay, it's a lie from Satan. The whole climate change hoax that the left, the godless left, have bought into, because when, as Chesterton said, a person stops believing in God or worshiping God, they don't stop worshiping anything, they worship new gods, false gods. The Bible makes this very clear. Today, there are many false gods that people on the left worship, including climate change, environmentalism. It's a false god. It gives them a sense of purpose in life. It gives them meaning, gives them solidarity with their co-religionists. It gives them a sense of moral superiority, and that's key, because it's the opposite of humility, which is Christianity. The root of sin is pride, and that's what the left has. And they need to feel morally superior. If you want to understand the left, a big way to understand them is that they have a need to feel morally superior to others. And the so-called deplorables, as Hillary Clinton put it, or the garbage that as Joe Biden put it. That's why they talk so badly about conservatives or MAGA or whatever they want. It's because they see themselves as morally superior and the elites, although it's completely not true. They aren't smarter, they aren't more intellectual. It's a thick veneer of intellectualism that covers their leftism, but it is not based in reason or in intellect. It is based in feelings and emotion, which is why there are far more single women Democrats and more married women conservatives, Republicans, right? Just for example. But the point is, there's a parallel between the left and the Pharisees in the Bible. If you know the New Testament, Jesus was constantly criticizing the Pharisees for their hypocrisy and for them seeing themselves as better, morally superior, when they in fact weren't. In fact, they were the opposite. But this is why Jesus chose these fishermen from the Galilee. It's like the equivalent to today, when you could say the majority of the MAGA movement are working class. That's not to say that it's not intellectual though. Conservatism. In fact, when conservatives and leftists debate, the conservatives always win overwhelmingly, because the left, they cannot debate, and that's why they don't debate and resort to shutting down the debate or calling people pejoratives, which, in effect, is their way of shutting down the debate. They won't debate a racist, for example, even though they're the racists, right? And also, they don't know our arguments. If a person knows and hears the conservative arguments of things, they stop being a leftist. And that's why they fear the information, and that's why they're in favor of censorship. But the conservatives, those on the right, they know all of their arguments inside and out. We are immersed in their culture that they dominate. The most dynamic religion of the 20th century and 21st century is leftism. It has completely taken over every aspect of society, from movies to schools to politics, everything, right? The media, the news media, everything. So we know them inside and out, and they have no idea what we think, because they are morally superior. They're Pharisees that are too good for us. They're on their way to hell for their pride and their false religion that gives them their sense of moral superiority. Now, the interesting thing about this is that they need this false religion to give themselves this sense of moral superiority. But what's ironic is that without God, there is no morality. There are no absolute morals. There's no absolutes. There's no moral absolutes without God. For example, murder. Is it morally wrong to murder someone? Well, if there's no God, it's just an opinion. You could argue there could be circumstances when you feel it could be good. And it is just an opinion, unless there's a moral absolute dictated by a higher authority. That's the case with all, true atheists, and the leading atheists will admit this, and admit it not embarrassingly. I mean, it's a fact. What I'm saying, it's a fact. But the average liberal or the average leftist doesn't understand this. They want their cake and eat it too. They want moral absolutes. They think that they can live in a utopia and promised progressive utopia without God and still have moral absolutes. But it's not the case. You can't have moral absolutes without God, without a higher authority dictating the morality. It's just an opinion. And I'll give you an example. Dostoevsky makes this case clearly with his work, Crime and Punishment, for example, in the characters' deliberation over whether or not it'll be a good thing to murder this particular person. You know, there's all kinds of rational reasoning you could have for why it would be all right to murder a particular person. It could say, well, it'll create some good, for other people or whatever you want, right? It's the same with all of morality. There's no moral absolutes without God. But the typical leftist is confused. The true atheists, they know this very well. They will admit this. But the average leftist that doesn't really think much doesn't know this. This need for a sense of moral superiority is also why the left is always continually inventing new things. They call it progressivism, but when, for example, the mainstream society catches up, if you will, with the leading edge, if you will, of the progressive people movement, the progressives, then it's not cool anymore. It's not avant-garde. It's not leading edge anymore, and it doesn't any longer give them a sense of moral superiority. I'll give you an example. Once mainstream culture had accepted homosexual marriage, that wasn't enough. For the progressives, it had to be something new. It had to, in other words, these things distinguish them. It separates them. It makes them feel better than the rest. And so the new thing became the insanity that men can be women, and women can be men or are men. In other words, transgenderism. And this whole insanity, but that's because it has to keep going and gets to the point where it's absurd for the people that aren't of this mindset, who are not college educated, because you have to be college educated to be this stupid, thinking that there's no distinction between men and women and men can be women. You get my point. That's why there's always this new ism that comes around to give them a sense of moral superiority. COVID-ism was another ism that gave them a sense of moral superiority. It's a big example. The big part of the root of the reason for the insanity that was in the COVID-ism movement, totalitarian movement, was this playing out of the Civil War on their on their enemies. It's a game that communists play of separation politics and blaming the one group as the reason why things can't get back to normal. That's essentially what's going on with even Trumpism, anti-Trumpism. It's their derangement over this, and the CVD was rooted in their need for moral superiority and blaming the other group for why things can't get back to normal. And that's why it's to the point where the other group represents an existential threat in their mind, and why it's leading to genocide, which is also something that God is communicating in his science. All of this is leading to politicide by the left on true Christians and conservatives, which is what incidentally is described in Bible prophecy. Now, how did I get off track there? I don't know. I was probably talking about how the Pope will become the Antichrist when the demons pretending to be aliens who will claim to be here to save us from our nukes and environmentalism. Yeah, that's how I got off track. Anyway, so that's the same month that the Pope issued this postcard of the image of Nagasaki. I just realized. Oh, wow. Oh, okay. So Luke 21:25, as I explained earlier, begins with there will be signs in the moon, sun, and the stars, right? Well, the sign, like I explained, was the sun and the moon being in Sagittarius at the beginning of the new year. And that coincided with the following part of the passage about the waves and perplexity of the nations, right? Well, it just so happens that the 1st and 31st of January in 2018 were the dates of full moons. It was a blue moon. A blue moon is when there's two full moons in the same month. But this was an especially extraordinary full moon because it wasn't only a full moon, or rather a blue moon, it was a super blue moon, which means that it's relatively at its closest distance to the Earth during the time of the full moon. So I don't know the technicals, but there are these rare things that the astronomers call supermoons, when the moon is extraordinarily close to the Earth. So it was a super blue moon. But not only that, it was a blood moon. It was a lunar eclipse, a full lunar eclipse that was centered over America. The nighttime period of the lunar eclipse was centered entirely over North America. It was a super blue blood moon. Okay? Now I just realized, I don't know why it took me this long to realize this, but you know what it is I hadn't really considered very much the prophetic significance of the issuing of this postcard. But it all came to me for another reason, which I'm about to explain. It all came to me today. So anyway, when we look back, we can see that the two Pope dates, prophetic sign dates in January of 2018 were the 1st and the 31st, the dates of the super blue blood moon. Well, the latter one being the super blue blood moon. Okay? On the super blue blood moon date, January 31st, Trump delivered his prophetic State of the Union speech, and Trump is God's trumpet, who was born on the date of a prophetic blood moon lunar eclipse. All right, but also The UN agency or organization, UNESCO, in other words, the UN, UNESCO, declared the sites, the hidden Christian sites in Nagasaki, to be World Heritage Sites. Okay? The hidden Christian sites are these temples and churches in the Nagasaki area. And they're called the hidden Christians because the Portuguese traded and had a port in Nagasaki. And I guess that was before Japan closed itself off to the world. But this is in the far south of Japan anyway. I don't know the complete history, but I do know that the Portuguese were involved in Nagasaki, not the entirety of Japan, but just Nagasaki. And while they were there, they converted a number of Japanese. And the Japanese that had converted to Catholicism were persecuted by the other Japanese for centuries. And so they went underground. They were the so-called hidden Christians. Okay? And so the UNESCO has recognized these hidden Christian sites as World Heritage Sites. And that was at the end of January of 2018, during the super blue blood moon. But the thing is, that day that UNESCO recognized the hidden Christian World Heritage Sites was exactly 666 days, which is the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy, before the Antichrist, Pope Francis, was in Japan and at the hidden Christian monument. When he was delivering his speech regarding nuclear weapons in Nagasaki. That is a prophetic sign that identifies the Pope as the Antichrist, from whom Christians will be hiding. Yes, that's right. Okay, so, and he issued a postcard about Nagasaki on January 1st, 2025. Now, how did I realize that this is all extremely important and related to the bomb? Well, of course, the Nagasaki postcard is related to the bomb. But how this all comes together and reveals January 13th is that is what is explained in another video. The video I'm referring to is the U2 War album video. The other morning, it occurred to me that well, it didn't occur to me. What occurred to me was the song New Year's Day. Because when I was about 13 or 14 years old, I was a big U2 fan, and I owned the cassette for the War album, and that was back in the days of Sony Walkmans and not having access to an infinite music catalog. And so you would, continuously play the same cassette over and over. And but the point is that that album is a part of my past. And the song came to me, I guess it would have been on New Year's Day. Okay, that was the first song to chart in the US. And again, the signs are about the US, and God uses firsts. So the first single released from the album War is New Year's Day. And I explained this all in the other video. I'm not going to really get into the explanation here. Not even at all. You need to watch the other video. It's so amazing. But it's the 42nd anniversary of the release of this album. And 42 months is symbolic of the period of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. And so 42 years symbolizes this. All right, but the thing is, the first album of U2 is named Boy. And on the cover of the album is an image of a boy. The third album of U2 that U2 produced is War. And it too, famously, has an image of a boy on the cover as its cover art. Yes, that's right. And that's The War was their third album, and that's why we had these 3 deaths in the waves that hit the coasts of the 3 nations, coinciding with New Year's Day. Like I've explained already, the opening of the 4th door, 4 symbolizing 4-meter high waves. But it was 3 deaths, and it was the coasts of 3 nations. And the end of these waves were on January 1st, New Year's Day. And it was exactly 7 years after the Pope issued a postcard with an image of a boy involving war. And U2's album War, as its cover art, is an image of a boy. And that is amazing confirmation beyond words of everything that I've explained in the U2 War album video on this channel, which if you haven't watched yet, I think it's apparent probably for you that you need to watch it. All right, so what is being revealed here is not only that on January 13th, the suitcase nuke or dirty bombs will explode in Manhattan. And it is not only that Pope Francis will become the Antichrist when demons who pretend to be aliens will claim to be here for helping us with our nuclear weapons and make Pope Francis the ambassador for the world, given also Pope Francis's track record regarding his ambitions regarding nuclear weapons. But as we have explained here, as has been explained, this is all a prophecy. These prophetic signs are part of a story God is using to point to Luke 21:25, which again is there will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars, and nations will be in perplexity due to the roaring of the sea and the waves, and men's hearts will fail for what is coming upon the earth. Let's just read it again. People fainting with fear and with foreboding of what is coming upon the world. This is a reference to the so-called or supposed descent of aliens from the sky claiming to be here from another planet, etc. And that's the reason for the portal symbolism here and the ports that were shut down in Peru and the opening of the portal doors. And specifically the 4th door on January 1st, New Year's Day, like I have explained, at the end of the 4-foot or 4-meter high waves. So what all of this does reveal, though, because of this January 1st date that God pointed to. In other words, what I'm saying is that this is a very important sign. Like, I should, use more emphasis in my voice there. This is an extremely important sign, this Pope Francis opening of the portal doors. There's lots more to it that's explained in other videos, actually. I can't explain it all. But I've given you a good outline here of what is going on with this sign involving the Pope opening the portal doors in Rome, where the Vatican is, which is symbolized by keys, which points to Revelation chapter 9 and the opening of the bottomless pit, the portal with a key. Okay, now this video has explained how all of this points to January 1st. God used all of this to point to January 1st, the end of Hanukkah, and he used the waves and the ports signs in Peru and Chile because of the Nazca lines, and it's symbolizing the giants and aliens. And incidentally, the theory of ancient aliens is the big deception that's coming upon the world, and that's largely symbolized by the Nazca lines. Because the ancient aliens theory, that's deception, is that aliens seeded the world and aliens have visited us before. And the lines in the high plains of Chile and Peru are proof of this. The Incas were trying to communicate with the aliens, etc., right? Okay, so that's why the coasts of Chile and Peru here. But again, what I want to emphasize is that all of this points to a particular date, a precise date, January 1st. Again, it's also exactly 7 years after the January 1st, 2018 Nagasaki bomb postcard that the Pope issued, right before the hidden Christians sites were recognized by the UN, 666 days before Pope Francis was in Japan and at the Hidden Christians Monument. Okay, so we've got January 1st. Now, God is pointing to the date, June 9th, 2025, as either being the day of the symbolic beginning of this opening of the pit and aliens, or it's a step. And that's how God's signs works. It's often not possible to know if it's just a step or the end of the trail of signs regarding the particular theme that God is pointing to. In this case, the symbolic beginning of aliens. I call it Aliens Day or Revelation 9/11 Day or Antichrist Day or Fifth Trumpet Day. It's this day that is symbolic of the beginning. I assume probably it'll be the day when aliens are in the mainstream news and it's accepted worldwide that there are aliens and that they are here. Perhaps even this symbolic day will be the day that Pope Francis declares that the aliens have made him the ambassador for the world. But whatever is going to happen, there's something that will begin symbolically on June 9th, or it's possibly a step. And that therefore means that there will be prophetic relevant signs on that date that will reveal more information as to how the trail is to proceed to the eventual symbolic beginning. Anyway, June 9th is being pointed to, and it is 159 days after January 1st, 2025. That's extremely interesting. And that's because 159 is 53 plus 53 plus 53. And God repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. And in certain numbers, God has embedded in it symbolism with another number. In other words, the inverse of 53, 1 divided by 53, is 0.0188. And that is a number God uses frequently in his signs to point to H188 in Strong's Hebrew Concordance, which is the word that means woe exclamation mark, used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God, including Revelation chapter 9 and the 5th trumpet and the opening of the bottomless pit with the key. It is a woe exclamation mark. And that's amazing that we have this 53 plus 53 plus 53 days connection, because it is essentially saying that we have a 188, 188, 188 connection, and that's an emphasis of its symbolic meaning through repeating it 3 times. And furthermore, there are 3 woes in Bible prophecy. But anyway, what's also interesting, that's an amazing second witness to this, is that the number 159 is the 53rd semi-prime number. And God uses semi-prime numbers for his signs and connections, a number that is only divisible by two other prime numbers. And we have in 159 not only a repetition 3 times of the number 53, but it is the 53rd semi-prime number. In other words, that's confirmation that this 159 number is in fact symbolism for 53, which is symbolism for H188 in the concordance, which is whoa exclamation mark. And that is entirely appropriate for what is expected on June 9th, 2025, 159 days after January 1st, the day the 4th door was opened, and the number 4 symbolizes door, at the time that the 4-meter-high waves ended on the coasts of Peru and Chile that symbolize in God's signs the coming demons pretending to be aliens. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived, and more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.